so the people online, and it gets recorded. Disney Plus, I'm a subscriber. I'll let that out into the world. I'll wear that badge. I'll own it. You can see I have 4 daughters. You may have met them before. Like, they love to come to SQL Saturday, SharePoint Saturday, stuff like that. They love to volunteer and help out. I chose profile icons for them. They let me know that some of my choices were not what they would have chosen and have adjusted since. I got stuck with Mickey because I'm that lazy and that was the default profile. But my oldest daughter, Becca, she loves Guardians of the Galaxy and Groot in particular. So I actually chose that one for her. Dad wins. Dad won. Kid 0. Moving down the line, Ellie, she's got red hair. I was trying to think, got to match the red hair princess. Which one do I pick? Looking at Ariel, looking at some of the others. I'm like, no. We'll stick with Anna here. She was good with it. Dad too. We get to Rachel, who was actually my youngest. And I picked Candace from Phineas and Ferb. Yeah, apparently that was the wrong choice. Dad got like -2 points there, so I'm like dead even now. She changed it to Simba. Why Simba? I have no idea. I'll have to have a conversation with her. And then my last daughter, Sarah, I'm like, oh, she's the most princess of all of the princess daughters that I have. Who of the Disney princesses most embodies just that whole princess thing? And I'm like, oh, it's got to be Aurora. And she was happy with it. So I'm going to call that a win at the end of the day. But the thing that I want to bring up as part of this is I can't go into their profiles and see what they have been watching on Disney Plus. It's a feature that's missing. I don't know if anybody else has looked at this, like a watch history sort of thing. I'm like, you know what, I have a problem I need to solve. I need to have a watch history. So what we're going to do today is we're going to walk through building a Power BI data set where we can track that. We're going to have a flow that will populate data into there, as well as a Power App that we can use to interact with that data. Okay? That's the narrative. It's cheesy, I know. Ben, if you want to laugh again, that would be totally appropriate. Thank you. But hopefully that gives you an idea of kind of what we're going to do. It's also going to be 100% demo. I prepared 0 slides for this. So say a prayer with me if you're religious at all. I am a brave man. Thank you, JR. So we're going to see how this goes today, all right? I'm also using the Edge Chromium browser here, you noticed. So beta software on top of beta software on top of beta software. I'm really just asking for it. So if it goes sideways at any point, I've got lots of things to blame it on. Certainly not myself, right? Other than maybe my choices. So the first thing I want to do is go to powerbi.com, okay? And go ahead, hit the sign in button, or if you can remember their URL and just go to app.powerbi.com. Hopefully you're already signed in. I would encourage you, if you've got your devices, you're welcome to follow along with this. This first part of the presentation is based on one I've given a couple of times locally, as well as a San Diego SQL user group and a few other places on Power BI streaming data sets. So if you have more interested in that, let me know. I'm more than happy to talk to you about it. This will be the very abbreviated version of that presentation, but we're going to create a streaming data set, okay? And this is the part that in the Power BI app just always gets me. So I had to walk through this demo a couple of times before this meeting today to make sure I could remember where the buttons are, because they like to move them, they like to hide them, they like to do different things to frustrate me as a presenter. But you'll notice up at the top right, there's a create button. So I clicked on my workspace at the bottom left. All of your data sets have to live inside of a workspace. So if you have other workspaces that are created in Power BI, you're welcome to use those. I'm just going to use the personal one that is available to everybody called my workspace. I'm going to click on that create button, and I've got 4 choices here. I can create a dashboard, a report, a data set, or a streaming data set. I want to do the streaming data set. Those are an interesting variation. So this isn't your standard SQL table. This isn't an Excel workbook sitting in your OneDrive. This is literally a streaming data set, so it's live. So that makes it really interactive and great for demos, like at the PowerApps user group today, right? We can do some interactive live data set streaming. So I'm going to go ahead and create a streaming data set. And I've got 3 choices here. Don't worry about the one in the blue and the one in the red. Okay, we're going to focus on the pure Power BI native solution. Okay, and I'm going to hit next. API is selected. and I have to give it a name. That's the hardest problem in computer science. Do you guys know that? Just giving things names. So I'm going to be really creative and call it Disney Plus. And then I have to actually give it the values. So thinking about my goal, what was my goal? Anybody remember? Watch history. Thank you, JR. We have one person paying attention. I'm flattered. So watch history. So what goes into a watch history? Help me out, not JR. Title, so the movie like that I'm watching, right? Okay, that'll be text. That's good. Anything else we need to put in a watch history?
It's Disney, so they're all rated G, so you don't need rating.
Well, I wanted to ask a question about rating. Maybe it's what I rated the movie, right? Like, how did I like it? I like that. I'm going to include rating. And we need it to be not text. I want it to be a number so we can actually do interesting Power BI things with it. And then, Ron, you were saying something here.
Profile.
Oh, yes. I want to know who's watching it, right? So the order of these isn't super important. Anything else we're leaving out here? Date time. Thank you, Mr. Schindler.
The year of the show when it came out.
Woo, I got the caps lock going there. Date, time. Well, we could just include the IMDb unique identifier, right? So we can go look up all of that other information. We're not going to go that crazy. I'm gonna say that's good enough for today. I need to change the date time to a date time. And then if you look down here, you guys kept hearing Ben mention Jason. Jason, he's that guy with the hockey mask in the horror movies. Is that right? Or is that's something else, right? That's a different Jason. This is JSON, all caps, right? Everybody here familiar with it? Do I need to give you the 30-second crash course on what it is? Because that's what it looks like, okay? It is a data interchange format, okay? It's plain text, it's human readable, but machines love it, especially in our modern browser first-class citizen era. That's a great format for interchanging data. So it's giving me kind of a sample there saying, hey, this is what one row of your data would look like, okay? So I've got a title, rating, profile, and a date time field that I'll have to give this service, but then I can do analytics with it. The last thing is this checkbox at the bottom, historic data analysis. If you don't check that box, the Power BI service starts throwing away your old values. Do they tell you how often they're going to throw them away? Not really. So can you count on one being there? Probably. Can you count on more than one being there? Maybe if you're sending really high volume. But for what we want to do today, I want to keep a historical record, so I definitely want to check that little switch and make sure the historic data analysis is on. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to hit that yellow create button. It's so inviting. And there we go. It says that it has been created, and it gives me a public URL. Okay, so if I want to be able to push data into that data set, that's the URL I need to use. Luckily for me, they have the raw, the curl, and the PowerShell versions. Raw is very literally the JSON we were looking at earlier. Curl, if you're using a command prompt like bash or similar, curl is often very used for kind of initiating web requests. So that's what that looks like, but it gives me something I can just copy and paste. In the Windows world, we like PowerShell. Me especially, I love PowerShell. So I'm going to say, hey, this is great. I want to copy this PowerShell code, and I want to actually go put some data in there. So I have PowerShell ISE ready to rock and roll here. I can paste that code in, and we can look at it, and I can help walk you through it. So on line 1, is that big enough, by the way? Do I need to make it any bigger, smaller? We're good? All right, we'll call it good. Line 1 is basically just that URL. It's declaring a variable endpoint and assigning that URL, that public URL that Power BI gave me. And then lines 2 through 7 are declaring the payload. So what am I actually going to be sending into the service, right? It's giving me that sample record. We're going to clean it up a little bit as we walk through it. So rather than title AA whatever 55, what's the first thing everyone is probably watching on, did I spell that right? I think it's an A right here, right? Mandalorian, right? Yeah, I'm getting a thumbs up from Shane. Very good, thank you. Am I right, Shane? Is that what everyone should first watch on Disney? Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you. We've got a Star Wars fan, ladies and gentlemen. How would we rate it, Shane? Since we're already picking on you, it defaulted to 98.6, which is probably like human body temperature, but it seems too low. I guess maybe we need to find our scale, right? So what do you think, Shane?
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. Okay, so our scale is 10. So we'll put in a 10 there. Profile. Well, as much as I'd like to think my daughters like Star Wars, I'm the bigger fan. So we'll do that for me. And then this date time, you'll notice it's got kind of this odd syntax here, right? It's got the date and then a letter T. And then, is it 23 o'clock right now? Like, that doesn't sound quite right, but we got that Z. So the hardest problem in computer science is naming things. The even harder problem than that is date and time, right? It's not like there is actually a fixed point where the Earth is around the sun and we could actually use that for meaningful descriptions, right? We got to have all these other constructs. So in PowerShell, one thing you can do is if I call getDate, it will return back the date to me. I can use .NET and say toString, and I can give it a formatter. And I happen to know that O is the sortable format that gives me back a date that's good. So if I wanted to use right now, I could copy and paste that string, or I could come up here and do a 8.toString. I wish I had like a screen overlay. I could have like tip number 1, bam, flash up on the screen, kind of like the old 1950s Batman, kapow. So toString with the O, that's a good trick to get the date time. And then this very last, any questions so far, by the way? I don't want to just keep racing. Like, this is a good chance for me to have a check-in point. Okay, we're good. So the very last line there, line 8, invoke REST method. What this is going to do is it's going to say, hey, I'm going to be calling a web method, a RESTful API web method, and I'm giving it the URI of endpoint, which we defined up at the very beginning. It is a post. All of your HTTP calls in your browsers have methods that mean something. Don't worry too much about it other than know that it needs to be a post. And then over here to the right, the body of the message is basically that payload we're creating. And just like in PowerApps, where we needed to convert it to a JSON big old long string, we're doing the same thing here in PowerShell. Maybe that should be the drinking game today. Every time somebody says JSON, right? But yeah, so basically it's converting it, and because it was just a single record, it's wrapping it with the @ in the parentheses, which makes it an array of those things. That would be tip number 2, kapow. Power BI requires you to send an array of these objects. So even if you only have one, it has to be an array when you're using the Power BI API. And so if we run this, and the demo gods are happy with me, I didn't get an error. Let's go back to Power BI, see what happened here. We hit done. Let's go to my data sets. Let's create a report, and move this out of the way. Let's do just title and rating. See if we have any data or if I messed it all up. Oh, we do have data, but it's tiny. I don't know if I can make that bigger. You'll have to trust me, I guess. We'll see it bigger in just a second. So one of the things that's kind of funny at this point, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this report, because if we get it out of this, then maybe we can make it bigger. View. Let's go back to our reports here. Well, it's slightly bigger. Everything but that really gets bigger. All right. You'll trust me that that says The Mandalorian if you can't read it, and its rating is 10. If I came back over here to PowerShell and I said, you know what, one of the other banner shows that they're trying to launch with is this new Lady and the Tramp. I'm sorry, I can't give that quite as high as a score. You know, it's still good. My daughter watched it, not me. She probably liked it. So we'll switch that to Becca. We'll run our script again. No errors in PowerShell. We jump back over. Wait a minute, Greg, you said this was real time. You said this was streaming. You lied to me? Look at this report. That only says The Mandalorian. You're telling me I got to come up here in this bar and I got to hit this refresh button to see it? Well, sure enough, when I hit the refresh button, it's there. We can do better, though, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, we can do better. So if we come and we look at our visualization here, we're going to, don't click there. Actually, I don't even have to edit the report. Let me go back. Let me make my window small enough I can actually work with it. So we go in here, and if I pin this to a live page, so basically I want to take this visualization and I want to click pin. Has anybody ever pinned a visualization before? How many? I guess that's a good question. How many people in here have used Power BI? All right, so a lot of you are familiar at some level with this. So I'm not talking complete Greek, right? So if I click pin, it's going to ask me, hey, what do you want to do with this? Where do you want to pin it? You've got to have a dashboard this lives on, right? So I click new dashboard. Everything we're doing obviously has similar naming because I'm trying to make my life easier. We're going to call it Disney Plus. I click pin, and I just want to go straight to the dashboard. I don't want to do any more configuration of it. I'm just happy with it. There we have this, data set showing to us. And what we're going to do is we're going to kick that to that half of the screen. We're going to kick this to this half of the screen. And anybody else here a Disney Plus subscriber want to out yourself? All right, there we go. Hand went up. Give us something we haven't watched that's like super embarrassing. Okay, so you've watched The Mandalorian. Ron?
Escape to Witch Mountain, the original version.
Ooh, what year was that, Ron? Do you remember? That's a classic.
1974.
All right, so we're going to put this in the Ron profile.
Spaceship boat.
It's got Devil's Monument in Wyoming too, right?
No, it's just a big pole.
No, just a mountain. All right. Okay, so Ron, what would you give it as a rating?
9.7.
9.7. Not quite Mandalorian good, but maybe that's on Ron's scale. Maybe Mandalorian's not quite as good.
9.6.
Now, Escape to Witch Mountain is better. So if you're looking for something to watch in the great expanse of Disney Plus, Escape to Witch Mountain, recommended by Ron. Ron Fetters. Okay, so I hit run, no errors, and did you see the dashboard update? That fast, right? Boom. Showed up that. This is where you applaud people. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. I shouldn't have to ask. I got a little angry. I'm sorry. But this is good. This is establishing kind of the baseline of what we were hoping to do, right? So we got our data set. We can do it real time. But what we want to do is be able to add to this in kind of an automated way, right? So I'm going to show you the PowerApps piece in a minute. It makes more sense to do the flow piece first, I promise. So we're going to do flow first, and then we'll do PowerApps, okay? Any question on Power BI side of the house? No, we're good? Okay, let's keep going. I'm going to make that bigger again. You can go to us.flow.microsoft.com. I assume everyone is in US tenants here. If you go to flow.microsoft.com, it'll get you to the right place once you sign in. And what I want to do here is I want to create a new flow. So I'm going to hit create over here on the left. And I want to do a triggered, I want to do an automated flow. And what are we going to call it? Anybody want to guess what I'm going to call it? Yeah, you guys are paying attention. I love it. So, oh, did I choose the wrong one? Demo fail. Wah, wah. Is it this one? Not that one either. Close. What was that? Instant. Flow name. Disney Plus. There it is. PowerApps. We're going to check PowerApps. Okay? So down here at the bottom, I'm going to hit create. So PowerApps is going to bring in some data for us. But what I want to do is I want to have a new step. And we're going to search our connectors and actions. So Power BI or Power Automate. There we go. Nobody take a drink. Power Automate has a couple of ways we can initiate things. So one of which is connectors, which are your connectors to like get out to your data sources, right? So I want to search in here for Power BI. And sure enough, there it is. I click on Power BI, and I have two choices. I can either refresh a data set, or I can add rows to a data set. What we want to do, we want to add rows. So I click on that. I have a drop down here where I've got to pick the workspace, and I was creating all of that under the My Workspace. The data set is Disney Plus. The table is, you'll notice, it has really just one, real-time data. We're not going to enter anything custom there, but it found it. And it says, hey, you have these 4 boxes of data that you need to provide answers for if you want to push data into it. So what I want to do is I want to actually ask for that in PowerApps, okay? So if I click in there, I could just give it a value if I wanted to just invoke it and always have those same values. But really, I want to be able to use my PowerApp to fill out those values and put them in there, okay? So I'm going to do ask in PowerApps, ask in PowerApps, ask in PowerApps, and finally, ask in PowerApps. So if you look at these, what this is actually doing, it's really hard to see on there, but it basically is saying, hey, you've got this variable add rows to dataset underscore the name of the field. So I just have to make sure I have those references matching in my PowerApp, okay? It's just a simple string match between those two, but by going through and clicking ask in PowerApps, it'll allow my PowerApp to pass those values over to this flow, okay? And that's it. We have one of the easiest flows ever created. So I hit save. We can run the flow checker if we want. There's no problems, of course. It's got great confidence in me. We do want to test it though. So I'll perform that trigger action because we haven't actually run it yet. So save and test. Green check, it's good to go. It just, and I have to give it a title. So I saw another hand in the back. Remind me of Darby O'Gill and the Little People. I think that's even older than Escape from Witch Mountain. That might be one of the oldest on there. Darby O'Gill and the Little People.
That one gets a 1 out of 10. I don't remember.
Well, that's got to have like some boost to the rating. 7.2. Okay, very good.
After 19 St. Patrick's Day, watching the same movie, 1 out of 10.
So will you be watching it next St. Patrick's Day as well, or is that tradition broken?
No, yeah, I no longer live with my parents. So
Ah.
I no longer have to
You are no
watch-
longer subject to watching apparently the only St. Patrick's Day movie out there.
0 to 19, now I'm 25.
Uh,
So yeah, those days are
Those days are gone. Very good. I love this. You guys are awesome today. And remind me of your name? Mike. That's right. Okay, so Mike's profile, and I'm going to jump back over to PowerShell and get one of those dates rather than trying to type it out. As much as I want to tempt fate and see what kind of problems I can cause myself, we'll assume that the time is close enough, and I'm going to hit run flow. So let's jump back over here. Hasn't updated yet. Says it ran. Come on. Yes, thank you. It works. All right, so we have built Power BI streaming data set. We have built a super simple flow that will just add data. It's going to prompt us in our Power App. So what's the last thing we need to do is go build our Power App, right? And then we'll bring it all together and show you how to put that into Power BI. So the last tab here, I love this URL, make.powerapps.com. If you're following along, feel free to go there. And we are going to do a Canvas app from blank. I'm a glutton for punishment. Anybody want to suggest an app name? Disney Plus. If you suggested anything else, I wouldn't type it anyway. So we'll do the phone layout and hit create. Here we go. It's creating for us. It's very exciting. Getting things ready, loading. All right, so we'll see what we can do to increase some space here. So the first thing we need to do, we've got our screen here, and we're going to need to insert a couple of things. So up there in the quasi ribbon, it's not quite as big as the others. I'm going to add a label. And let's make this, see if I can make this a little more visible here. Oh. So that's still legible enough. So we had 4 fields that we were going to fill out. One was title, right? And so we'll do title, and then we will insert a text box to go with it. And just to keep things clean, I want to rename our text input to title. Okay, then let's pop another label in. Drag it down here, and we had the rating, right? And we need to input, text input, drag it down. This is the least exciting part of the demo. I'm sorry, guys. Bear with me. There's nothing that's more fun than watching somebody drag and drop stuff on a screen and have typos and everything else, right? So we got rating. Then we are going to add one more here for profile. Come on. And text input associated with it. Rename that one to profile. And you remember our last one? We have the date time. And this one, we can actually be a little bit different. We are going to go crazy and have a date picker. All right, and we will call that date picker just, well, we'll leave it as date picker. And the very last thing we need to insert on here is a button. Where's my button? Oh, right there. And it adds it at the top. Nobody wants it at the top. You all want to see Greg scroll. And what we want to do with the button is, for its action, we want people, when they click on it, to do a flow, right? So flow is associated with button 1. You'll notice here we have Disney Plus. It found it for us. It's like, hey, you probably want to use this one, so I'm going to go ahead and just associate it. It's going to add it, adding, done, and you'll notice it says, hey, you've got to finish this. Basically, there's an expression up here that's part of that button's on click or on tap or whatever event where, you know, hey, I'm going to invoke it. I'm clicking this button and I want something to happen. And so you'll notice it created this object Disney Plus for me that represents my flow, and I'm calling the method run on that object for my flow. And it wants, if you can see kind of above the expression bar there, it has those 4 parameters that I mentioned earlier from flow, where it's wanting the title and the rating, the profile, and the date time. So let's go ahead and add those. So the first one is my object title. And then the rating, but the rating is special, okay? The rating is actually the number, right? So we can't just use rating. In fact, I don't think I can actually use title. I think I have to use title.text, right? And so we need to do rating.text, but we don't want it to be text. We want it to be a number. So what do? We come in here and we type value around it because that's completely obvious, right? But that's the trick. Boom, tip number 3, just punched you in the face. Okay, value around rating.text, and then it wants profile. So assuming I named my things, and I can type profile.text, and then the last one is our date picker 1 dot, is it a selected date or something like that? Did I miss it? Whoa! Turn on sticky keys. No. There it is. Select a date. All right. Who thinks this is going to work? Am I that lucky? Yeah. Scott's nodding yes. I have a good feeling, right? So tab away from that, and let's tempt fate. Let's hit play. Let's go to the app. I'm that bold and daring. All right. Next volunteer. Who wants? There we go. The real David Price. Please stand up. No, just. All right.
The other one is, did you watch The Love Bug?
Oh, Herbie.
1969. My daughter who turned 12 next month. At least it's not in black and white.
I love it. At least it's not in black and white. All right, so the Love Bug, and is this your rating or hers?
Well, they stopped watching it after like 20 minutes, so they probably gave it like a 3.
All right.
They're like 11 and younger. So.
3.0, okay. The real David Price. And we'll go ahead and submit. We're going to let that run. We're going to jump back over here. We're going to wait. We're going to hold our breath. Wow. Yeah, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. We have done something amazing here today, all right? So there's one last step that I want to do here, okay? I'm jazzed. Is anyone else jazzed? I think the hairs on my arm are standing up. So this is incredible.
Are you giving it out data out of Disney Plus?
No, I'm not. So the last thing I want to do, because they don't offer it, Ron, that was the problem. So if we come back here to my reports and I find Disney Plus and I want to edit it, edit report. It'll be kind of hard to see. I'm going to minimize some stuff so we have a little more room on our report. Has anybody seen this button right here, this PowerApps for Power BI? That's part of Power BI now. They just recently added this. I say recent, it was actually like a year ago. It went into preview, but it's out now. It's available, and it's a great way that you can use PowerApps to interact directly with the data that Power BI is surfacing. There's 2 ways. I'm only going to show one today because we're getting a little short on time. But the 2 ways, one is you can actually use it to modify the underlying data. So the streaming data set, this is another reason I'm not going to show it, doesn't allow you to modify it. But if I was connected to, say, a SQL Server table, this is a great way to build forms over database fields where I can actually go in and modify records. So rather than giving somebody some other UI or having a developer spend time building some sort of a web application or whatever else, you can use PowerApps to give them the ability to modify their data, and you can use Power BI to give them a way to slice, sort, filter, find those records, and do it. All within the constructs of security within your own companies, okay? Mike, you had a hand go up.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I just read that You can actually use PowerApps. You can actually use Power BI within a PowerApp.
Right. It goes both ways. So maybe that's something we'll show next year. We'll have Mike present. Everybody on board? Yeah, Mike? Yeah, okay. So what I'm going to show today is just embedding our Power App in it. So there's not a whole lot of native integration that's really going to happen. It's just basically giving space in our report for our Power App to live. So what I do is I click Power Apps, and it pops in the visualization there. I'm going to drag it over to this corner and make it bigger. And it's still impossible to see. So that's probably about as best as I can do. The nice thing is it's really hard to see, but if you guys are following along, you can see this. Or when you watch this video later on YouTube or try to follow another tutorial, it actually is really great. It gives you 3 steps there on how to walk through connecting your data. So it's actually very, very helpful and says, hey, what do you want to do? I should have a button at the bottom. I'm going to have to make this smaller. Oh, here's what I got to do. This is the thing I forgot. If you want to have this connected, you actually have to pick your visualization here, but then you have to actually tell it what properties you want from your data set to be passed over to that Power App. Okay? So I can do create new, and it will create that association. It'll create that Power BI connector. It creates a slightly different one, actually, where it'll pass the data through there. But it'll do that. Because we already wrote one, I'm just going to use Choose App. Okay, we're going to do a shortcut. We're running out of time. I'm going to do Choose App, and oh, I forgot. This is where the demo fail comes in. Demo fail number 2, people. Learn with Greg. Is I'm going to delete this visualization because it gets cached. But I forgot to do one very important thing with my Power App. I got so caught up in the moment of how cool it was and that it was actually working that I didn't share it. And I'm sorry for that. I apologize. That's on me. So I got to come back here. We got to save and share this thing, okay? So we're going to save it. It's Disney Plus. Save. That's why it wasn't showing up in the list in Power BI. So I save it, and it's like, great, you've saved it. Go ahead and click share. I am going to share with everyone. All right, now, backing up. Somebody can ask me if I feel lucky. There we go. Thank you. Do that. Oops. Okay, choose app. And there it is, Disney Plus. I'm going to add that in here. And sure enough, we now have our Power App embedded in there. And I will save this report. And we can go back to reading view. We can see that it works that way. If I wanted to switch to how it would look on a mobile device, it will stack my visualizations and let me do that thing. All right, last Disney Plus volunteer. Who's out there? Anybody? Are we wearing out? Are we running out of steam? Do I have to bribe you with more cookies?
I don't suppose Fantasia's on there yet.
Fantasia. I don't know if it is or not. Should we look? I bet it is. If it is, then we're going to use JR. So we'll log in as me. We will search. We'll ask Bridge Investment Group why they're not blocking Disney Plus. But I mean, clearly, this right here, like if you want to go work somewhere awesome, like this is clearly the sign, right? Like they're on top of it. So this is the place. So search by title, Fantasia. There it is, both editions. Okay, JR, you're on the hook for this one. Title, Fantasia. Rating. An 8? All right, we'll do 8. This is JR, and we'll do today. Hit our button. We will refresh, and there it is with an 8.0. Thank you, JR. All right, so wrap this up. What was the original goal?
See what your daughters are watching.
Right. Be the overbearing, conniving parent, right? That's watching. No, not really. We just wanted to keep track of it, right? We want to have an idea what's being watched and what's good and what's not, right? Really, that was just kind of a fun exercise, made a great narrative for the day. You guys were fantastic audience, by the way. It was really fun for me to walk through it. I feel like we met that goal. Do you guys feel like we met that goal?
As long as
Yeah?
your daughters are watching and put their shows in.
Yeah, I'm going to have them go fill out the PowerApp now, or use the PowerApp, right? Load it on their phones and make them fill it out. What questions do you guys have for me from walking through that? Any? Yeah.
Do you pin that, after you pin the visualization to the?
Right, to a dashboard.
Do you do that same thing with the PowerApp, or?
If you want to. You can certainly let the
And it'll
PowerApp,
function that same way?
it'll function that same way. So if you want it on a dashboard, so it's just right there and you can see the dashboard and the data, that's great. If you want the PowerApp to just live on its own, it can live on its own. It can be on your mobile devices, your desktops, whatever. Like all of those things still all work independently or together, right? Great question. Any other questions? Yeah, Ben.
So if you do live data, does that like cost more? I've heard it costs more.
So it does not cost any more. There are a couple of gotchas around it. So I don't have a Power BI Pro subscription or anything like that. It's just available to everyone and their tenants. Obviously, I can't share it with anyone else because it's part of my workspace.
Right.
So if I needed to be able to share it more broadly with my organization, I would want to have a Pro license so we could put it in a workspace and have it more accessible. But it doesn't cost anything extra. The thing I found out that kind of stinks is there is a 1 gigabyte limit on the data. And so I had a routine that was running that was adding data sets in there. I don't know if all you know, I work for a company called WEC. We're involved in the power industry. And basically I was taking the peak load I can't remember if it was every minute or every 5 minutes for the Western US and putting it in a data set. So I could kind of see, in the morning it ramps up and then in the evening it ramps back down. The curve is a little bit more complicated than that, but it was interesting to kind of follow it. And suddenly it stopped working. I'm like, why did this stop working? Well, it's because I had that historic analysis on and I had filled up my data set and it said, "Bop, you're at 1 gigabyte, you're done, I give up, no more." So if you have a Pro license or you're paying for premium capacity, then those limits are different. So, but for the free one, I believe that's what it still is today. Rob.
I've got a question. You know how they came out with the new pricing for PowerApps where you have to, for $10 a month, you can get the 2 PowerApps, and then if you do more, you have to get the $40 a month subscription. Does it apply with Power BI, like you embed different PowerApps within Power BI? Yeah, I'm assuming the user has to be licensed with PowerApps and Power BI.
And of course somebody asks a licensing question, right? So any licensing experts in here? I could hazard a guess.
I think it depends on how you get your Power BI licenses. They're bundled with other subscriptions, right?
Right, like if you've got an E5 license.
If you're an Office 365, then you get some licenses that way. The answer that nobody likes to hear is it depends.
It depends. So I didn't notice anyone from like local consulting firms here. Anyone from a consulting firm here today? A few. So I would say talk to your consulting firms and have them help clarify the licensing issues. As a guess, this licensing rodeo is not yet over. So we'll see what continues to happen and change. When they first announced the changes, they made more changes. And then they released this FAQ, and there were more questions, and things have generally started to settle in and quiet down. But yeah, we'll see what happens.
Eventually it'll be like home care where you just give all your money to them and then they'll give you what.
Right. So I had one more question in the back there. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. I'm cheating here and trying to look. It is Mike, right?
So if there's anybody, so we've been working with Bo and really kind of doing first version of this demo, but we're having issues with PowerApps
Yeah, so the first thing that comes to mind with any time you see that, can't, invoke those methods or whatever errors is it's almost always around, for my experience, sharing and permissions. We had an issue with our on-premises data gateway that for whatever reason when we had set it up, only administrators could use it. And so I'd go in, I'd configure a connection, I'd create a flow or a PowerApp or whatever. Everything was working perfectly fine. I would go to share that with someone else and they could load the PowerApp, but they couldn't use the data gateway. So I don't know if that's the same sort of scenario you're seeing or not, but I would definitely check some of those sharing permissions and make sure all of those different components had, the right sharing set up around them because they do depend on each other. Anybody else have any ideas on what might be going on there?
Might be an issue with the PowerApp and the flow being in different environments. Yeah.
I guess a prod in a dev environment, I don't know.
Yeah.
They are in the same.
Okay.
You know how when you go into the admin and you have to select all the permissions for the data and for the farmers, and I feel like I get lost every time.
Yeah. Poke around. Let us know, go post on the meetup or something and we can try to help you track it down.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Any other questions? These are great questions. I love the discussion. If not, we'll just wrap up. But thank you everyone for being here today. We really appreciate it.